Episode 36, boys.
You have to start welcome, mate.
No, not doing that shit again.
It's a tradition, mate.
Come on, mate.
It's not a tradition. It's been done once.
It's now a tradition.
It's a new tradition. Let's go.
No.
I'll do it then.
Guys.
Welcome to episode 36 of the Racing Line podcast.
Do you know how lame that sounds, bro?
I didn't care. It's our thing now.
It sounds lame as like
We're the lame triplets.
It sounds
That's
lame.
our band name, the lame triplets.
No,
let's go.
All right, episode 36, Racing Line podcast. Epic weekend of racing, boys. I mean, you could literally have stayed up from Friday to Sunday and had racing all weekend to watch. That's how good this week was. We had Nürburgring 24 hours from Thursday night. We had Monaco and all everything associated with that. We had MotoGP.
Mugello.
We had MotoGP at Mugello. We had British GT if you were interested in that as well. Awesome weekend of racing. But let's start with the crown jewel in the spectacle that is Formula One, the Monaco Grand Prix. Where do we begin? Interesting race.
Red flags.
Not because of the race itself. Qualifying was probably the more exciting of the two sessions, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, but even that wasn't as good as what it's been in the past.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm not sure I know why, to be honest with you. I think where I'd like to start is just kind of giving a few shout outs to some honourable mentions. I think my first honourable mention has to go straight back to George Russell again this week. Did a really good job, and I think it's interesting, but he keeps beating Hamilton, and he's qualifying better and he's performing better in the races. So something has to be said for that. So I give him a bit of kudos. I think after McLaren's very ordinary week last week, for Lando to be fifth in all practice sessions, fifth in qualifying, and then to finish the race in sixth, it's a pretty good result. We won't go into it tonight. We spoke about it enough last week, but DR looks like a defeated man this week. If the Insta stories are anything to go by. I think VB had another great race. I would like to talk about the Canadian boys tonight if we get a chance, because during that second safety car,
they do nothing to help themselves, man.
Gee, it made me laugh.
Was it Latifi that crashed on the way to the grid?
They both crashed.
They both did
safety cars.
Yeah,
they both. Yeah, like, do you want to start there? Maybe we start there. So
I've been saying since we started this podcast,
I know
that both of them, especially Stroll, just because he's a whinging, rich boy, they need to go. Why are they still there?
Because they've got too much money. That's the problem. But you know what? It was actually good, because after waiting an hour for the race to start, and all this frustrations being built up, at least when the safety car goes, it's like, oh, here we're finally racing. And then you see those two knuckleheads. Latifi says, Latifi hits the wall, right? It's a wet race. It's icy. There's not much grip. And he says the car doesn't turn on his radio. I'm like,
that's right.
Shit.
He did. Yeah.
I'm like, no shit, mate. You are some smart guy. And then within half a lap, we saw Stroll do the same thing. And anyway.
Can I have an honourable mention as well to another driver?
Yeah.
Yuki.
Yeah.
He ran off at turn one about 3 or 4 times in the exact same way.
He was just figuring out his breaking point. Had to be.
In the Grand Prix, not in practice.
Well, he was still figuring it out, right?
I feel like Yuki is one of those drivers who there's tracks that he actually is really good at, like last week. And then he comes to these other tracks that he I suppose, having said that, do the F2s race there, don't they?
Yeah, but he's only been racing
for a very limited amount of time.
Since he was like 15, I think it was. Like he got into the racing game pretty. That's not an excuse.
He's done the least races getting to his F1 crew.
Yeah.
So I think I'll give him a bit of a pass for this weekend.
But the other consideration is he is still racing in F1, so there's got to be some level of, like, if you're racing there's got to be a level of expertise that you have. He's kind of a bit like the Strolls in that regard. He's not really there on merit. He's there because Honda need to put a Japanese driver on the grid, right? But I think he done well. He got into qualifying 3, which was which was very good for him, particularly at a track like that. But I think the biggest story of the weekend has to be, we'll talk about two things. I think the red flag and what was going on there has to be the first point of debate. And then number two, I think it has to be the track itself, and whether there's a future for it in Formula One, because that was a very processional race. Now, it's always a very processional race, but unless you were Gasly on the intermediates when everyone else was on the wet, it hardly looked like anyone was getting a run on each other this week. So how do you boys see those two talking points?
I think one thing that we always talk about, or we've been speaking about more recently, is about them trying to make a lot of tracks more passer friendly. And like we've seen it with the layout for Albert Park, we saw it with the DRS zones. I think it was at Jeddah, and every street track that they sort of make. And I think when we look at Monaco as a circuit, there is literally no ability to make it like to give you a place to pass, unless they would have changed the layout drastically, I reckon.
Yeah.
But the actual track itself was from when cars were a lot smaller and probably not as fast. So
do you think that? Sorry, keep going.
Like it's the crown jewel in the race, like in quotations, but in terms of everyone knows, like what is it, the last 8 years minimum, probably even more than that, everyone's been saying like you need to qualify at the front. Like this is the first time I think the winner hasn't been from the front row through like no fault of their own. I mean, it is a pretty boring race. Unless it rains, you get red flags, or the team forgets your tires in the pits. Like you're Danny Rick a couple years ago. I mean, other than that, what really is there?
You know, I was thinking when I was watching it, you know, the whole tunnel and then chicane section. What if they made that a straight all the way through to the second chicane at the swimming pool?
It's still not wide enough, I don't think.
You'd have a hell of a long ride, but to actually
you would
make
need,
an
they
overtake.
need the chicane. They need the chicane there to slow the cars down in case you would to have a crash coming through that tunnel
and launch into the sea.
You would go, or you go straight into the fans.
Yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about it, H, as the circuit moving forward?
Well, Stefano Domenicali's already come out and said that it's their contract hasn't been renewed for next year as yet. I think it will. I think they're just playing hard.
They actually don't bring any money to F1. That's the other thing.
Don't get me started on the TV direction, because Monaco do their own. But
they do what? Sorry.
So Formula One does the world feed for every track except for Monaco. Monaco has their own, and that's why it's always. Do you remember last year something was happening at turn 1, and then they panned to Lance Stroll coming out of the pits or something? Like it was completely. It's because the TV director is not the normal one, so.
Oh, I see.
They always the TV direction is horrible. But anyway,
even like when the red flag came out in qualifying. By the time they got to where the crash was, Yuki wasn't even there anymore. He was already going into the pits as well. Like little things like that. That makes a lot of sense now.
We didn't even see Mick's crash until 5 minutes after the red flag came out. Like it was, but I don't know. I think they're saying tracks like Spa and Monaco are under pressure. I think Spa's one of the best tracks on the calendar. That needs to stay. But I think there is an argument there for Monaco to not be on the calendar. And maybe we can do like a rotational basis where it's on every 2 or 3 years. Then I think it'll add more value to it. But every year it's just a punish.
I really don't see any entertainment value in racing in Monaco. I mean, here's the sort of the juxtaposition. You have 2 races this weekend that sort of position themselves to be sort of the crown jewel of open wheel racing, which you have the Indianapolis 500 and the Monaco Grand Prix, and they couldn't be 2 more different races. But when you see like one against the other, especially on a weekend like this, there's really no sort of question of which one's a better thing
more
to watch.
appealing spectacle.
I mean, and they're going in and they're going around the oval, and it's still a better sort of spectacle than the Monaco race, because Monaco race is just a procession. I mean,
you know what I loved about Indy?
Tell me.
The lack of safety rules. Like, they've got the pits are out in the, they're not inside a garage kind of thing. But then at the end of the race, you see there's a whole heap of people in the pit boxes, that aren't even part of the team. They got no helmets on. They got no nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's just epitomizes the difference between Formula One and Indy at this point.
It's a grown-up sport.
Yeah. I think what IndyCar also tries to do is keep it, because they do struggle to collect fans, and the Indy 500 is by far the biggest draw card for them. So they still try to make it as relatable as possible for people when they do come to the events, because they're always trying to bring more fans in. Like they have nothing really in comparison to NASCAR, unfortunately. So that's always a consideration for them, where in Formula One it's still very much run
Eurocentric.
Yeah, but it's also just very calculated in that regard. You made a good point, and I don't want to just start talking about tracks again, because I feel like we've spoken about it
too much.
I think we've spoken about it enough, but I do think that what was really interesting, there's a few things that I took from it. Number one, for the first time in however long, these cars were coming out of I don't know what the corner is that leads under the tunnel, but those cars don't have a whole lot of downforce, and they were kind of drifting their whole way through that corner a lot of the time, which is something I noticed, which was good to see. But I feel like if you're going to have a track like Monaco and you want to keep racing there, the cars have to be smaller. Now we know that the with the new iteration of car, they plan to get a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter in the next 2 to 3 years, they're saying. But I think the writing's on the wall for Monaco with these new cars. It was that dull to watch. That it just wasn't appealing at all, really.
And they took the biggest jeopardy out of it as well when they didn't let them start when it was wet.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the other thing that we need to talk about tonight. So we've obviously got new race direction, and it was raining very minimally at the start of the race. The race definitely could have got started. It didn't, for whatever reason. And then it seemed like that they were just waiting for that very heavy shower to pass. But even still, what are they there for? Are we there to race regardless of the conditions, or are we there to wait for good conditions and then have our race? So I don't know how you guys felt about that, but just being someone that has to wait till midnight to watch the race, I felt my patience definitely starting to wane. And the interesting thing is, like you said, that actually would have given the race a little bit of spice, a little bit of jeopardy. And then even after the storm came, it's like they were worried to get the race started just because there was lingering cloud over the mountain in the background. So it was bizarre. Hopefully it's a bit there's new race directions. Hopefully it's something that kind of makes Formula One say, hey, this can't happen moving forward. But even that, it doesn't increase the spectacle at all. I personally think that the biggest telltale sign for how difficult it is now to pass with these new cars around this track is the fact that Sergio Perez had a huge lockup going into turn one, and he was able to very comfortably defend his lead for the next 30 laps still. And I was hoping and thinking that maybe the fact that he had such a heavy flat spot would maybe have triggered the tire in braking to then reflat itself when it went around that point. But even that didn't happen. So
dude, the track is a goat track.
It's a what track?
It's a goat track. It's so narrow. It's like a little track on the side of a cliff. There's no room. The only time we saw real overtaking was when Pierre had the inters on and they started working for him. And that was, I thought, oh, this is finally some pretty decent overtaking in Monaco. And I suppose the tires were what really gave him the confidence and the ability to do it. But in open racing, when everyone's on the same tires, the funny thing is, you'd probably be stupid to try and move at nearly any corner on that track. The front corner isn't even conducive to passing. Really, it's such a narrow little kink, and there's literally no runoff anywhere. Like if you sat down and you thought about a track without knowing like what track it was, and you put out this layout, and then you judged it on its merits. I mean, I know you love it, because you just love stupid goat tracks to race.
I've been saying that I think its days are done.
But I mean, really, they're always boring races. Like even the team principals are like, oh, if you need to qualify on the front row, or like you're not going to get a win kind of thing. I mean, Ferrari's the only team who have not won when they've locked out the front row in like the last 15 years.
It's the most Ferrari
They've done
thing
it
ever
twice.
too. But can I say, do you think the budget cap, because we all know there's a budget cap now, has affected the actual racing? Because you think back a few years ago, I remember, I think it was 2018, Leclerc was making big moves down after the tunnel into the chicane. He had the big accident. Like there was always people throwing the cars around, even though the previous cars were bigger. There seemed to be
They're
more.
smaller. These are bigger than the old cars.
No, I think these are smaller.
These are wider.
Yeah, but
Sure
they're not as long. Anyway, there seems to be the drivers are being more cautious and they're not throwing the car out. And I think having this budget cap, as much in theory, it's meant to bring the teams closer together.
Yeah.
I think it may be affecting the racing because everyone's scared to wreck the car.
I think the budget cap is a farce. The more like I hear stuff about it. I mean, and we're going back to stuff we talked about last week, and everyone's preaching about this budget cap, or we're not going to be able to finish the season on a budget cap.
They're all talking rubbish.
I don't even think I don't even think F1 wants a budget cap. I just think they want people to think about it, because we're going to add another 4 races next year. So like realistically, they say we're going to adjust the budget cap, but that just means they're okay with teams spending more money. Like that's not actually helping the teams out. That's just helping them out to get more money themselves. So I think the budget cap is more a PR stunt than anything. I mean, because if put it this way, if Ferrari or Red Bull go, oh, we need to expand the budget cap so we can finish off a good season because we're running out of damage money or stuff like that, they're like, all right, we're just going to adjust it again because we're not going to let the season like.
No, I don't think they'll. I don't think they'll do that. To be honest with you, I think we can't talk about with any certainty about the success of a budget cap until we see next year's racing, until we see the impacts of like the success ballast, essentially, like it being more successful is going to impact your ability to develop your car the next year. So I think it's a bit premature to be talking about whether the budget cap will be successful or not. I do like your question though, H.
Yeah.
I think maybe a bigger consideration than the budget cap might just be the fact that it was wet and people weren't as comfortable throwing the cars around. But there has been a lot of rhetoric by Red Bull and Mercedes. It's always those teams, right? Like they're the teams that are spending huge amounts of money, and all of a sudden it doesn't surprise me that they're the ones that are struggling to stay under the cap. Like that's no reality. But I hope that F1 stays strong on it, because there's all these threats of Red Bull saying, oh, we just won't race and all this kind of shit.
Don't race.
The reality is, like, there's no way they would have gone into this season without simulating expenditure for the whole season. So I don't know how that's going to play out. I think it's just them trying to kind of free up a bit more space for themselves to develop or to whatever it might be.
Dude, teams like Haas are the teams that have to really worry. They have Mick Schumacher's ridden off that car twice in like 6 races.
That's right.
Yeah, and the reason I brought it up was because I think when he first wrecked the car, he didn't race in one of the races because they were worried they wouldn't have enough parts for. I think it was for Melbourne.
He wrecked it in qualifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And he didn't race it in the race after. That's right, because of Melbourne. But that's also a flyaway. They're flyaway races, so they're not Europe centric. In Europe, they can get parts a lot easier, I suppose.
Speaking of Schumacher, do you think he's seats in jeopardy?
It's all part of the learning, mate. I don't think his seat's in jeopardy. He's shown a lot of good stuff this year, as well as his 2 crashes. Like, he's definitely looked more racy, had a few more noteworthy qualifying results as well.
I think
like more than anything, like that track is really hard for guys with not much experience. Like we've seen Leclerc,
Verstappen crashed there 3 years in a row.
We've seen every big racer have a pretty decent moment at Monaco. Like it's not rare, that's for sure. I mean, this year was probably the one that had the least the least incident, I'd say.
What I think Schumacher has actually found out this year by having Magnussen as a teammate instead of Mazepin is just what a effective teammate, like how it helps to build competition. And I think the first few races when Magnussen definitely had the upper hand, it was kind of like a bit of a learning experience for him. But I think he's kind of bounced back in the last few races and really put in some solid performances. But I think it did take him a little bit of time just to realize, I'm not the biggest fish in this team. And there's other drivers out there that I might have to like extend myself more towards, like just to achieve higher things. So I think that has actually been a really good thing for the team, just having another competent driver in there to bring both of them up. But yeah, I don't think his seat's in jeopardy. His name's too big. And the reality is, if he just shows some sign of growth, then like when Bottas goes, he'll be in the Alfa Romeo seat.
Yeah, definitely.
Fair enough. I was just thinking about it after what happened yesterday.
Yeah, he hasn't been as world beating as some might assume, but like it's also he's in a pretty ordinary car. I mean Magnussen did
ordinary. Like in some races it's good. Like last week, but like it's sort of like the reverse McLaren. Wherever the McLaren is good, that car's not, and wherever that car's not good, the McLaren needs to be good. So it's a bit like a bit of a seesaw between them.
It's been interesting. Like with the exception of the 2 top teams, all the teams on the grid, even Mercedes, seem to have slightly fickle cars that more than in years gone by perform better at particular circuits and are dramatically worse at other circuits. And it's been good for like the midfield battles just to keep it interesting to see different cars at the back end of the top 10. So I don't know. I think that's probably one good thing about these new rules. But
here's one thing I want to bring up now. You bring up Mercedes. I just want to draw a bit of attention between Mercedes and like a team like Ferrari, right? So if you look at Mercedes throughout the year, since we've known the performance level of that car, pardon me, you would say that as a team, they have pretty much maximized
100%
their position every race and sort of minimized the hurt, right?
I reckon they've outperformed the expectations of the car.
But what I'm saying is like you have a team that even though the car isn't working at its best, the team is still running as like a world championship team. And that was sort of what we were saying about Red Bull through the doldrum years as well. Like they were always running at a high level compared to where the car was to its competitor. Right? Yeah. But like here, like I think this weekend especially showed like the main area that Ferrari need to get onto like quickly
strategy
to sort of it's not even strategy. It's just like it's more like how
damage limitation.
But like what is like how is the team led kind of thing, right? You see like Red Bull and Mercedes are run by sort of alpha male kind of leaders, but the team always it has a level of expectation to how it runs every weekend. Whereas like Ferrari has had this problem, like not even just recently, like even that year when Seb was actually mounting a pretty good challenge.
18?
I think it was 18, and then it all fell apart. Like the team has always had a very like emotional sort of core, and I think like in times like this, like you need a team that is not emotional and is very sort of systematic.
I think that's a bit harsh, but to be honest with you, because like
but if Ferrari lose this season on this trajectory,
I understand.
There's been no mistake from their drivers in terms of like what to expect. You know what I mean?
Loss.
But I mean, I'm talking about the drivers' championship. Like Leclerc is their front runner, and he's now behind in the championship through no fault of his own. You know
Well,
what I'm
it
saying?
is because he made a mistake at Imola, and the fault has to go squarely on him for that particular race result. But apart from that, like
He's been pretty good.
they made a bad decision this race, bringing him in after Carlos. And I think the fact is that this was obviously not the track to make that mistake. But
It wasn't bringing him after Carlos. It was putting him on the tires so much later than Perez.
Yeah, but
that was the main mistake.
Do you think the fact that they've been out of championship contention for the last 3 or 4 years? Red Bull had last year with Mercedes. Red Bull's match fit. Red Bull has it down pat.
Red Bull only had 1 year to sort of make it count, and they were ready. That's what I'm saying. They had a long time of nothing, but the year that they had a chance. They were ready and they jumped on it. Like if this might be Ferrari's only, hypothetically, they might not get a chance next year. Let's see how Mercedes comes back. You know what I mean?
That radio message, the communication is horrible. Like dude, at this level,
they called him in, and then while he was in the pits, like 20 meters from the box, they're like, "No, stay out." I'm like, dude, he's in.
I don't know. I think there's going to be growing pains, and that's just there shouldn't be. But that's the reality. I think the match fit statement that you guys have raised is a very good one. I think like that's the reality is like if you're not in a situation that like the difference between a battle in the midfield and I think a battle at the top is very different. Now, obviously I'm spitballing, but again, like if you, for example, want to throw caution to the wind and have a different pit strategy, then the reality is you might be a lot faster than the cars behind you, so you don't have as much of an impact if you were to make a mistake. Whereas going into this particular situation now, I think we've seen straight away that the impacts of not getting the strategy right are astronomical. And we saw that last year with Mercedes when they made a few mistakes as well that gifted Red Bull victories, that at the front of the field, when it's as close as it is, and if you looked at even the racing as well, like how close were the front 4 cars?
Oh, so good.
Late into that, like that's probably something that we didn't talk about, but that was very tight. The front 4 cars at that race were all really tight towards the end of the race. So it's going to happen. I do think that with the upcoming slate of races, though, particularly when you think about places like Spa, when you think about places like Paul Ricard, when you think about a lot of Silverstone, tracks like that, Baku, I think Ferrari definitely has more than enough leg room on tracks like that to kind of get back into this championship fight.
Well, Charles put it on pole last year.
They were looking dominant even this weekend until it kind of all fell apart for them. And I think even though he didn't win the race, Carlos Sainz kind of bounced back to a bit of form. He was half a tenth off Carlos in qualifying, and they were very close during practice as well.
One thing with Carlos that was really interesting and sort of I think cool to see was they were really calling for him to come in for those inters, and he was adamant saying, "No, I don't want to come in for the inters. I'm just going to wait for the slicks." And like, "No, come in for the inters." And he's like, "There's no point. I'm just going to lose track position." And he really stuck to his guns. And he didn't come out in the front, but like it definitely was like once he knew that sort of window had passed, he knew that sticking to what like to that his strategy.
He stuck to his guns.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's something that Leclerc might do more in the future. Like you don't want to go too far as well because the team can see all that information on the on the pit wall. But I just think like when you're leading from the front and you're a front running team, you don't have the luxury of like having a reactive strategy. You have to be very proactive.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Mercedes and Red Bull really excel, is that they crunch the numbers, but their strategies are very rarely questioned, like in the hindsight of a race.
They've also been in those situations much more regularly.
And that's what I'm saying. Like that's where that match fitness, I think, comes from, that we're talking about in terms of like leading from the front, where Ferrari sort of definitely haven't been even closer than that, like to challenge like that kind of thing. I mean, the other thing is that they've actually had pretty good strategy up to this race. So I don't want to be too critical.
Yeah, I think it's still such a long season right now. Like I think they'll get back in the hunt. They'll learn as they go. Like the reality is the season is so long nowadays. Like you can afford to have one or two slip ups and still be right there at the end.
There's still 15 races left.
Their car still seems to be objectively the better car as well.
100%.
Like that. That's the long and short of it.
100%. Very much the case. There was something else that I wanted to say, and now it's slipped my mind.
About the racing?
Yeah, about the F1. No, we'll move on. If I can't think about it, we'll move on. H,
We've got H's power rankings.
Oh, yeah, have you sent through those power rankings?
Yeah, on the chat.
All right, let's have a look at that.
All right, so yep, you want me to read them out?
Go for it.
So number 1, I got Checo.
Before you go, is this just on the season or the last few races?
Last 2 races. So since we last did our power rankings.
All right.
Number 1, Checo. So he was faster than, well, at one stage he was faster than Max in Barcelona. Qualified quite well, and then this race, led from the front. We know it's easier to do in Monaco, but still he put himself in that position and kept it. Yeah. 2, I've got Georgie boy. Mate, he's out driving that car big time compared to Lewis. Now these aren't totally based on, just prefacing this, these aren't finished position, it's how they're performing in relation to their car and etc. 3, I got Max, obviously, because he's won last race, really come yesterday. 3rd,
leading championship.
Leading championship. Charles put it on pole, lost the race due to no fault of his own. He did DNF in the last race, but he was in the lead. So
there was no fault of his own either, really.
That's right. So 5, I got old mate Fernando, mate. What he did yesterday.
Questions about this though.
Yeah.
Like I think yesterday he was quite good, but I think in the last 3 races, I think Ocon's performed.
He went from P20 to P9.
Yeah, but that's going through the cars he should go through.
Yeah, but he still had to do it.
That's fair enough. Okay, this is your power rankings anyway.
Yeah. No, that's fine. 6, BB. I think he's having a stonker season. 7, Carlos.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think he's down 7-0 in quali against Charles.
No, he needs to pull up and he's made mistakes, so that's fine.
Yep. Yesterday was a good result for him, maybe to build some momentum from as well. Like he really did. He looked like his old self, I think, yesterday for the first time this year.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's going to do good for his confidence. 8, Lewis. He's just constantly putting in those 6, 7, 8 positions.
I would have put Lando above Lewis, and I'd probably put Esteban above Lewis as well. Really.
Well, Lando finished P9 last week.
Yeah, he finished P6 yesterday. Lando was actually really good yesterday.
I think I like your. Can I throw a few suggestions?
Yeah.
I would throw Valtteri to 5th and swap him with Nando.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would put Lando in 6th, Esteban in 7th, Nando in 8th, and then Hamilton, and then Carlos and Hamilton. I don't know. I don't know what Lando has done wrong, really. Like the car wasn't that good last week, and he was pretty good this week. I don't think he's been a world beater, but I think he's been better than Lewis. Lewis has been pretty. Like I think this is. Lewis, I'll be honest.
I think race last week though.
I think this is going to be his last season, eh?
You keep saying that.
I really do. Like
I think so.
I don't know how what is he, 7-time world champion? I don't know how a 7-time world champion, like we've had 6 or 7 races now. He's getting beaten qualifying and race now pretty consistently by George. I don't know how.
I think the quali's pretty close, but race definitely.
I mean, like in the last couple, like he was on top early on in quali, okay. But I think more recently, if we'll take the last 3 or 4 races, I think he's getting it served to him. Now he's kind of saying. He was saying in an interview yesterday that something happened and it kind of affected his ability to qualify. Or maybe it was the red flag at the end. But I'm like, you know what? Like, regardless of the situation, everybody kind of got affected by that at the end. Like, he just hasn't been performing. I don't know if the trend continues.
I think Lewis could be could be having a somewhat similar thing to what's happening with Danny Rick, to be honest. Like they're in a position where they're getting out qualified. The car's probably not to their liking.
Yeah.
And I reckon like their confidence, probably the first time in their careers, both of them really, is probably shot because they haven't, like, even if your car is shit, but you're performing better than your teammate, like there's something to sort of
hold on to.
But like at the moment, they're both performing subpar, but their teammates are making moves and doing stuff, and they seem to not be able to do. I mean, the caveat is Lewis had a really good race through the pack last week, and then this track, it's hard to pass. But the reality is, he still got beaten by his teammate, and that's not going to really give anyone any solace, no matter how good your race was last week, or you can't pass.
I don't want to spend too much time on Danny Rick after last week.
Yeah,
no.
But looking at his
it was a pretty good premonition, but I think
looking at his interviews this week, looking at his facial expressions, his body language. I think he went out in FP2, he started to throw the car around, which I loved, and then he had the crash, and I think that threw him again, because he was P7 in FP1, so he was quite fast in FP1. Throwing the car around in FP2, had the accident, and then I think that just shot him again, and it's put him back.
One thing I don't understand, I've been thinking about it this week. I don't know what Zach Brown thought he was going to achieve by bringing up sort of contracty like mechanisms. I mean, there's no benefit to really either side of the equation, because Zach Brown actually brought Ricardo in. So if Ricardo fails, it doesn't reflect well on Zach Brown either. So I don't see the point of bringing up contract mechanisms in talks that have been made public now. I mean, we can all see he's not performing well. Like, you can say stuff without bringing up such specific, such like specific details that are probably only privy to the team and Danny Rick.
Yeah, but it's probably like being a football manager every now and then. Sometimes, like, you've got to put your arm around the shoulder. I'm sure he's done a lot of that because of the fact that he brought him in the pay packet that he's on and all that kind of stuff. And then sometimes you just have to light a fire under them and see if that gets a reaction.
I don't think
that
managers managing an F1 driver is anything like managing a footballer.
Well, they're both athletes, and they both go through peaks and valleys in performance. And I think he's in a valley, and I think there's probably been a whole lot of, putting the arm around the shoulder and saying it's going to come. And I think it's only a natural tendency every now and then to say, well, maybe I've just got to light a fire underneath his ass and see if he jumps. And he didn't. He just let it burn. He let the flames lick his butt cheeks, I think.
Well, we'll see in Baku, because he's usually quite strong in Baku.
He's good at Baku.
There's more, like Monaco, if you're,
if you bury yourself in the pack, you're stuffed. Look at Gasly. Right. Gasly was having the best, one of the strongest looking weekends. His teammate brings out a red flag. He can't even get a P1, and he has a pretty awesome race, making moves, and he finishes P12.
I think that was his best race of the season, but that was his best race of the season. He was awesome. Really good. I loved his helmet too this week. That just bit of gold on it. Beautiful. Really
what was the go with Hamilton swapping halfway through the race?
You know what? A lot of them
rain visors.
Yeah, a lot of them weren't prepared with the rain visor, and then when they had the 1 hour, maybe that was the reason why they had a 1 hour delay, because all those people that had special Monaco helmets that couldn't race them, all of a sudden they had an hour delay, and they all changed to their
what was the go from Lewis's
back to their special? Oh, he got some
amethyst crystal thing.
They made some model of his helmet.
Is that for jewelry?
Yeah,
I think it's what
sculptor made it. Some sculptor made a model of his helmet, and then inside the model, it was like cut open, and there was like jewels coming out of it. So then he like
replicated the model.
He replicated the design of the sculpture on his helmet to pay homage to the model of his helmet. It was a very self-fulfilling prophecy, like a very self-fulfilling experience, I think. But
hashtag blessed.
Not right now, mate. Not the way that he's performing right now. interesting race. I'm looking forward to getting back to a track that provides a bit more options.
Baku's always fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Baku. At the very least, you get passing maneuvers in the front straight that are completely unrealistic, but good to look at.
Are you talking about the runway?
Yeah, it's pretty much a runway.
What do we jump into a bit of MotoGP?
Yeah, I was actually really enjoyed this weekend of MotoGP, to be honest.
Well, you let's throw to you then.
I picked it, boys. Pecco, I picked it.
You did pick it, but man, it didn't look as easy as you your pick probably made it out to be. I mean, where do we begin? Do we talk about? I mean, I want to talk about firstly about Fabio Di Giannantonio. Did I butcher his name? No.
Just call him Digger.
What an awesome effort in qualifying.
Digger. That's his nickname, Digger.
There's one thing that I think is very underrated in MotoGP qualifying is that if you go out in qualifying 1 and you're setting really good laps, usually it helps you when you go into qualifying 2 because unlike anyone else, you're warm and you can.
But you lose a set of tires.
You do, but you also gain a lot of you hit the ground running a lot quicker. Like you sort of hit it from where you left off in Q1. And I think one thing that really helped Fabio DG was that he was following Miller and Marquez, who were the 2 fastest guys in that Q1 session by far at the time. And I don't know if following them gave him a blueprint for like a really good lap. But man, on that when
there's worse people you could follow.
Huh? Yeah, dude.
There's worse people you could follow.
He wasn't as close to Marquez as Marquez was to Miller. Yeah. But there was a part when Miller and Marquez were coming around on their last flying laps, and they were both setting red. Yeah. And then I noticed in the background, like on the timing screen, that Fabio was also setting reds. And then I was looking at his splits and I'm like, shit, this guy's getting pole. And Marcus is going to beat Miller because Marcus is getting his toe down the straight. So Jack's not going to make it into Q2 this race. And sure enough,
Joe, you got to get to your point, mate.
And sure enough, it happened. I'm just trying to set the stage for a rookie's pole, mate.
You're just like telling us a tale.
I'm telling you, yeah. Anyway,
leading us down a path.
I mean that was probably one of the best Q1s I've seen this year. It was really good. And then also just the VR46 team as well.
Yeah.
Actually getting into Q2 to begin with. If you can get into Q2, obviously you're going to be in that top 12. But they were all like, and they're all Italians. They probably all raced at that track many times. But like, what a interesting number one front row, but also what a great event for the VR46 team to get some shine at the same race that Valentino Rossi's number gets retired from MotoGP. I mean, I thought it was a really good qualifying session.
It's sad, not sad, but like after both being on the front row and then seeing them finish, I think they finished 5th and 6th. Like that would be like, you'd be like, oh, they performed pretty poorly, but for them to finish that highly was a phenomenal effort for that team.
They've never had to manage their tires to a race at that position.
The point I'm trying to say is like they did really well. But like you would look at it and be like, oh, they've started 2nd and 3rd and they dropped back. But no, for them, that was a fantastic result. I think the biggest thing that I took when I was watching this race is how far, like only a couple of years ago, with the exception of Rossi and Dovizioso, who were both getting a little bit long in the tooth, there was definitely a conversation about where the next young Italian, group of riders was going to come from. And then very quickly, Rossi established the VR46 stable, and pretty much any Italian rider that wants to can get out there and be involved in it. But to see the talent, like just the number of talented young Italian riders in the grid right now, from where it was only a couple of years ago when it was predominantly Spanish, is phenomenal, and it's changed very quickly. It's obviously the reason why the British have also started their own youth team with, Vision Track, British Talent Cup, whatever it's called, because it's so,
And the
so
Americans
quick.
have American
Yeah,
racing in Moto too.
because, yeah, it's like this race for me just showed, it was like testament to those 5-6 years of development, but it was awesome to see. Another great race, I think, for Quartararo, considering that the rest of the Yamaha stable were nowhere. I think we have to give him a lot of kudos. He's definitely riding the wheels off that bike. And
Dude, Darren Binder actually was the second highest finishing Yamaha, which I was very surprised with.
he's doing a lot better though than we gave him credit for at the
Yeah,
end of last year.
he really is. Like we slammed him, and he really is.
He showed us.
Outperforming. Yeah, he
did it. He did it because he heard us.
Because
Right?
what do we know? I know. We lit a fire under him like Zach Brown. No, but quickly, what you were saying about the VR46 stable, whatever you want to call it. I mean, what better track to sort of have those young guys performing well at? Valley's track, with what I was saying before. And then also just want to give a shout out actually to the VR46 team. So we have one racer who really has changed the landscape of MotoGP. And even now in his retirement, like there's still that legacy and that pathway that he's created for these younger fellas coming through. I mean, and I think Rossi's last couple of years in MotoGP didn't hurt his legacy, but they weren't what like
didn't help his legacy either.
People remember him for.
Yeah.
And I think I was sitting with my dad a couple of weeks ago, and he was just watching some old like Casey Stoner versus Valentino Rossi races on YouTube. We watched about 3 of them, and I was really reminded like what it was like watching him in his heyday. Like it was he really was a phenomenon, and just for him to be remembered this weekend, and for his team to actually put in their best result and their best sort of performance in 2 years, 3 years of being there was awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to sort of dig into the real like nitty gritty of the weekend. Like firstly, Pecco, awesome race. Started from the back, and it wasn't an easy race for him to get past because he was passing mainly Ducatis and then Quartararo. But I mean, he definitely looks like where he was at the end of last year now, and I think last week's crash has sort of hurt him a bit.
Yeah, I
but
agree.
I mean, he looks good.
The only thing that is probably lucky for him is that the Yamaha is fickle. So if he's able to get any like semblance of consistency this season, and he was able to pick up 3 or 4 wins, I would say that Quartararo wouldn't be finishing second in all those races.
Yeah.
Just because of the way the bike is, and when you look at the strength of the Aprilia, he probably would have helped if he had Marquez also there filibustering. But I think the fact that there's the Pramac bikes is that.
This track was so hard for him to overtake. Like you could see bikes just not able to pass. Like this was probably the first time I really noticed like bikes struggling to pass each other. And it sort of lessened at the end when you sort of saw tire strategies come into play with it.
But I guess also when you've got that many, like when you've got the concentration of Ducatis at the front of the field, I think it's always going to be hard because they're faster than everything else. And on tracks with long straights, like when are you going to really get past it?
Yeah.
And then when it's Ducati against Ducati, the same situation is going to occur just because they're kind of all nullifying each other. But I think he needs to get some consistency. Where do we go now? We go to Le Mans, I'm pretty sure.
They just came from Le Mans.
So where's the next track then?
I'll find it. You keep talking.
I can't remember. Anyway, so if he's able to get any kind of consistency, Barcelona. Well, that's
right, Barcelona.
Yeah, well, that would help the Ducati with a straight like that. If he's able to get any kind of consistency, I think with 6 races to go, there might be a championship up for grabs again. But he needs to really kind of make hay.
He even said himself, he said, I need to be a beast.
Yeah.
Like he knows he needs to go into beast
tell you
mode,
what,
win every race.
the problem is going into beast mode can also run the risk of
Crashes,
putting it into the kitty litter.
which we've seen before.
Yeah. Well, what about the news about Marc Marquez this week? What do you make of that?
I'm not too worried about it because, like, realistically, his season hasn't been like he's not really in the title running, and I mean realistically,
I think it's pretty obvious that there's something that's affecting him.
Yeah, but also the bike's not that good. I mean, it's not as good as we thought it was at the start of the year. I mean, there's definitely limitations to it, and if he can't race at 100%, and he has a chance to be back for next year, I mean, go for it.
He's still young, yeah. He's still young. He's
Dude,
still 29.
He's 29. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I think this is going to be his last major operation. Like, if it doesn't work now, man, like, what are you doing? Like, you're way too young to be sort of causing like permanent damage to yourself.
But that's what I was going to ask. Like, he seems to be forever injured. Is it
Dude,
going to affect him moving forward?
He wasn't
injured for so long, but now it's just it's one injury that he can't seem to shake. It's the same right arm problem. But dude, he puts himself in positions that he had a qualifying crash.
Yeah,
that was so gnarly. And I was when I saw him flip, I thought, oh, he's not getting up, and he just jumped back up. But I mean,
I'll tell you what, you can't question his spirit, eh? Like, he's a tenacious, and he's a tenacious guy when it comes to riding motorcycles.
Not even that.
Probably foolish, but tenacious nonetheless.
He's tenacious to a fault.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, like I don't see a real lose in it. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like he is Honda. So, get him well, get a better bike under him next year. I think Aleix finishing third was, I mean, that Aprilia is coming into its own. He's got his contract sorted for next year, him and Maverick for another 2 years.
He's a dark horse for the championship, I think.
I don't think he's a dark horse. I think he's on for the championship. Dude, the bike, we've had enough races. We've had enough races this year to see the bike in all its conditions. I mean, he just has to keep his wits about him, probably do Quattararo, start finishing some, like, just rattling off good results. But I mean, with the long and short of it is he's much closer to the lead of this championship than Bagnaia is. You know what I mean?
So it's 9 points. If he, like, one thing that I think Aleix has, in his like older years now, he's got a bit of wisdom and he'll stay on the bike. And 9 points when, let's say, for example, Quattararo was to throw it down the road a race in the season, and all of a sudden, there's a very good chance that he can claim something. I think for a championship push to occur, I think there might need to be 1 or 2 more wins in that bike.
Oh, 100%. I can see it.
I don't think it's going to be as simple as kind of making the podiums and that's going to be good enough. I think there's got to be at least 2 more wins in that bike. Just, that's 14 points essentially over everybody else. I think that might need to be a must, but I'm liking where that bike is, and it's definitely not the finished product at this stage. So it'll only get better as the season goes on.
What do you think of the news of the what's the team called? RLN, RNF becoming the Suzuki, the Aprilia pretty much satellite, but works satellite team, but one works bikes next year. I mean, that's massive.
I don't know why they would not want to do that, considering how compliant that bike looks this year.
What a signal of intent, though, really.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's almost like, it's really weird. Like, we know that Gresini is an awesome outfit, and they win. They win at what they do. Like, you see how well they're doing this year. As soon as they get on a Ducati. But at the same token, we've seen Aprilia, release themselves from Gresini, almost kind of say, like, we need to do this on our own. We need to do it our way. And they finally kind of just put all those pieces together and developed a really great bike. So
they had the pieces last year with Gresini. Like, let's not get that wrong. Like, this bike is from last year. It's just more developed. I think the decision to leave Gresini was done before last year, because Gresini wanted, more competitive bike, and realistically, they've had the best season, a better season than even they would have had on the Aprilia this year. But I mean,
this
in
season
terms
is
of
trumping their late Honda success with Simoncelli and
really,
Bautista.
like it really, yeah,
Has to be.
yeah. But I mean, there's definitely going to be riders next year who want to be on those two other Aprilias. I mean, Maverick's going to be staying with Aprilia, which I actually think is a good idea. Number one, because they've given him another 2 years, so there's no doubt in his mind. I mean, there's going to be contingencies, I'm sure, but they're giving him the confidence, and he has been making improvement from last year. Even though you said you don't see what's happening, I think like he's been finishing lower than what you'd want, but higher than what he was finishing before. So I'm seeing growth. I
think that those next two Aprilia seats could be an all-Australian team next year. I would not be surprised to see Remy and Miller on Aprilias next
apparently
year.
Remy's staying at KTM and Miller's going to Tech 3. That's the word on the street.
Actually, I did read that.
Because the guy who's running KTM is the old guy from
Poncharoll.
Yeah. So I mean, that seems to be done. I did hear
that. Oh, then that's not going to happen, is it?
I mean,
so there's going to be two Australians on the Tech 3 bikes.
That's what they're saying. Oh, it depends what happens with Oliveira. If Oliveira leaves KTM, Jack will probably be on the factory, or maybe they'll get pole back.
Where could Oliveira go?
Aprilia
or Yamaha?
No, Yamaha's only got 2 bikes next year. And then,
but I don't think what's his name signed on for
Morbidelli's contracted for next year.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it looks like they're keeping Quartararo because Lynn Jarvis this week came out and said there's no room to bring in Toprak next year. I think that's who they want to bring in next. He's their poster boy. I think get a Turkish guy on the grid as well. But man, I think there's gonna be you've got Rins who's not in contract. You've got me who's not in contract.
Me's going to
I think Dovi's done at the end of the
Yamaha.
year.
A Honda, sorry. Yeah, it's going to be interesting though. It's going to be very interesting.
Going to be a massive musical chairs.
What do we? H, throw it.
I was just gonna get you guys to give us an update on how Remy's doing in his first season.
Underwhelming, but I think it's interesting that KTM. Some people jump on that bike and they take to it straight away, and then you've got other people, not just Remy, but even someone like Zarco, who was killing it in Moto 2 and jumped on the KTM and couldn't figure it out on the life of him.
He was killing it on Tech 3 Yamaha.
Yeah, sorry, he's Tech 3, but he's chilled in. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I don't know, it's just interesting. I think there's a lot of pressure on Remy because he is the Moto 2 world champion. I think we said it last year that he won the championship through his consistency, but he doesn't have that raw talent to pull a bike that Marquez or Quartararo has. And I think that might be part of the growing pain for him. And he might need a more compliant bike. And, the KTM, it's a good bike, but it's definitely got its flaws. I mean, Oliveira has been up and down all season. Binder, for the life of him, can't qualify the bike, but just manages to. His late race pace is just.
The bike apparently has a problem activating its tires. So once the tires get up to temperature, it seems to be fine. But there's a lot of damage caused. They have to do long runs in qualifying to actually get the tires worked up. And then in a race, they're starting from the back and further back than they would like. They're taking a bit of time to activate the tires. So then by the time they get to where they need to be, and they can come through the field, we've seen it so many times, but a lot of damage is done that they have to sort of reverse.
It's so interesting because then when you saw Oliveira win the race, it was a wet race. There was no tire activation that was taking place. Right. And even last year when we saw Binder win in the wet in Austria,
that was a very different race. Kind of win.
But then they also performed well in Indonesia, where everybody was having issues
activating their tires,
figuring out the tires as well because of the smoothness of the surface. So that actually that makes a whole lot of sense now that you say that. But I think, yeah, probably too early to tell. Both of the riders on that
Dude,
in that
he's
team
beating
have
his
struggled.
teammate. I think that's all he can really do.
Yeah, and they both struggled. Like it hasn't been like a breakout year for either of them, and we kind of had high hopes for both of them at the end of last year. So I think probably need a little bit more time there.
Being a realist, you would say, like, this is the hardest year of any rookies coming into MotoGP, because there's at least 20 riders on that grid or at least 10 who can win a race, and there's 20 really good bikes on that grid. So to come in with guys who nearly all have been on the bikes before, and then to be asked to perform, and mix it with those guys on tracks that you haven't raced on, these monsters that these bikes are, is a hard ask. And I think the thing is, the wraps that they had for Fernandez were massive, and for him to be outperforming him, out racing him, and now mainly out qualifying him as well. I mean, I think it shows the maturity that he has, but it's also showing that, yeah, he's winning his teammate battle. And like I said at the start of the year, all he has to do is not be in the headlines for the wrong reasons. And if we don't talk about him, he's probably just, he's doing an okay job. I mean, KTM, they've got problems with the bike, and I'm pretty sure he's alluded to the fact that Tech 3 aren't getting the updates that they were sort of promised they would be getting as quick as they were promised they'd be getting them.
Yeah.
I mean, so just don't crash, learn, stay on the bike. And I think
for 2023.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's going to be chances for him to progress, and I think there's going to be seats for him. Just don't do anything stupid, and don't cause a scene like we've seen people like Zarco and even Iannone years ago do, that then put you out of favor with all the teams. Just, be professional.
I agree. Well, boys, the next race we have for Formula One is on the 12th of June at Azerbaijan, which is a very different circuit to Monaco. So it should give us a little bit more, hopefully a little bit more to talk about when it comes to the racing. The next MotoGP race is in Catalonia. That's on the 5th of June. So that's next weekend.
Next weekend.
Got a little bit more to talk about then, but I think we'll leave it there for tonight, gents.
Yeah, we'll go for a MotoGP deep dive next week, I think.
Thanks for your time, boys. Always
Thank
good
you very much.
shooting it with you. Joey, legends.
Mate, it's all barbecue.
It's always barbecue. It's always barbecue, boys. All right, Ben. Have a great night.
Thanks boys.
For your time.
Cheers,
boys.
Bye.